Okay, hi you guys. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Allie Wilkins and I have a special guest today, my friend Lisa. I'm really excited about our conversation today, and we're going to be talking about um, the yoni and how the yin and yang principles really combine in this way, because so many of you are familiar with masculine and feminine principles, but we don't really talk about it in relation to our menstrual cycles, to sexuality, to the yoni itself. So Lisa is really an expert in this. She's really been diving into it and shares a lot about this. And so I was like, oh, I want to have her on to talk about this. So do you want to introduce yourself, Lisa?
Sure. I'm Lisa Van Leeuwen. I own Do Yoga with Lisa. And so basically, I offer online and in-person yoga. And I specialize in pelvic yoga, pelvic floor yoga, which combines yoga, traditional yoga, with pelvic floor exercise. And that doesn't just necessarily mean strength, it can also mean stretching. And so, learning how to stretch and strengthen the pelvic floor on the yoga mat. And so I use this to help students with period pain, all sorts of other pelvic floor issues such as leaks, trouble orgasming. I also help people with prenatal and postpartum yoga as well, and can even have people later on in life want to start to maybe experience some vaginal dryness and things like that. So I teach everybody about pelvic floor muscles, which very few people seem to ever learn about until there is an issue. And then hopefully they meet a nice gynecologist or a crazy pelvic yogi who introduces them along the way. But yeah, so my mission is to help kind of, as my teacher says, change the world one pelvis at a time. So.
I love it. And something that I love about Lisa is that she shares so much about things that we don't talk about very often as women, but that are very normal. And so what I love about what you're doing is it's bringing voice to something that a lot of us are experiencing, but are maybe feeling uncomfortable talking about, or it's not just like something you openly talk about at the dinner table,
Yeah.
making these things normal because they are normal.
And
So
I feel like even before I specialized, I somehow was always the teacher, like the yoga teacher whose students would talk about their pees and poops with. And so it just kind of seemed like a very natural transition for me. But I felt that way for sure. I experienced a lot of period pain and pain with intimacy and lots of pelvic floor issues myself, and really didn't know where to go or who to talk to. My grandma was a nurse, but like she's still like, we didn't talk about this stuff. So
hmm.
I think it's really hard for people to know even how to start the conversation about your pelvic floor. Few people, I think, even like until they meet me, have like heard the word pelvic floor muscles altogether, but they don't even know what it is. So, oh, I
Yeah,
should grab my pelvis.
please do. Holds, please. She's grabbing her pelvis.
I always like, oh, here we go. Yeah. So my pelvis, I take it with me to all my classes. And so the home to your bladder, your uterus, your rectum. And so this beautiful bowl is in charge of a lot. So we need all of this to function properly for things like menstruation, sexual function, bladder function, all of these functions. So
Yeah. So I know you just showed us your pelvis, but can we talk about for a moment what the pelvic floor actually is? Like for
yeah.
me, I just know about it in relation basically to Kegels, but other than that, I haven't heard anything else
I
about
know. And that's unfortunately, most people only hear about like the Kegels. And so our pelvic floor muscles are just like any other muscle, they need to be strong and flexible. And so these muscles that are holding everything together, you can kind of see even like right here. So the anal sphincter, and then going around the vaginal, we can see there's this figure eight almost that happens. So this
Mhm.
center is like the perineum. So a lot of people with even like chakra systems, like a lot of times when they refer to the root or the tail, for me, like the root is the perineum. Like
Yeah.
this is the root. And so this is like structurally holding so much together. And then all these pelvic floor muscles and your glutes and all of your muscles work together. And so if we have an imbalance in these pelvic floor muscles, it can create pains elsewhere. So we can start to have pain in the low back, in the glutes. We can have pain in the knees. This is like the foundation, like feet are foundational for sure. But our hips, like if anything here is imbalanced, it can create just so much imbalance up the chain and down the chain. So down the legs and also going up the spine. And so I feel like, unfortunately, it's overlooked, but to me, it's the foundation. And so the pelvic bowl, if you will, in class, I call it that, or womb space. I call it different things depending on which class. But it is holding all of these together. And so when we create imbalance, there could be tension that's squeezing, shifting, pulling things, and then that can create imbalance in the muscles. And then also, if you don't have full nerve and blood flow, then you can also kind of just start to even think, if you don't have full blood and nerve flow, how's that going to affect menstruation or sexual function or all those other bathroom functions? And
Yeah.
so it's kind of one of my teachers also calls like the perineum, like the cross of um we think of like so dirty and like the unclean and then the pure and the pee and the poo and balancing. And so it's kind of the pelvic floors that uniting of so many different things that I think each on their own are hard to talk about. We don't talk about our bladder function, or we don't talk about our rectal function, and we often just skip over talking about menstruation. And usually that starts from like no education as kids about these muscles and about how they work together and about proper function. So that's kind of what started my journey. Is I thought period pain was normal. And then, I fast forward to being almost 30 years old and find out period pain does not have to always be the way it is. It's not just par for the course of having a uterus.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things we could talk about that you just mentioned. And I think like just a basic thing for us to understand as women, a few things like number one, we haven't been trained about our body because for so long the medical system was really geared based on a man's body, not necessarily um, teaching us about how we're different, but looking at all human bodies sort of as being the same.
Yeah.
And I think it might have actually been in my last YouTube video with Kate. She trying to think of what it was that she said. She said something like testing was only done on male bodies until like 1985 or something like that.
Yeah.
So much of the research that's been done hasn't been on women. And even if you go to doctors today and you ask them about, holistic things or ask them about birth control or like go deeper into some questions, sometimes you'll get laughed at.
Yeah, I mean, I know I got put on birth control at 14 with no hormonal testing whatsoever done. And I went in with like irregular periods and period pain. They put me on the pill. It never helped. And like nobody sat there and like thought about like my muscles. Like I was running cross country at that point, and then
Mm-hmm.
I stopped cross country. Like the nutrients that I needed, I wasn't getting. So my period disappeared. Then I was doing all this activity, making it super tense and like not getting full blood and nerve flow. And then all these issues, like I had tense muscles, which made cramps worse. Nobody like pieced that together. It was just like, boom, here's your pill, and
Yeah.
that'll make your period pain go away. And I think that's one of like the things that I like when you say masculine and feminine and like the studying being done on males, like birth control has a time and a place, and everybody like your body, your choice. But I truly believe like one of the biggest missions of that was to get us on like a more linear clock instead of a cyclical calendar
Yeah.
so that we could show up as like a consistent workforce, as we could fit, our cog could fit into the wheel. And so
Yes.
yeah. And so if you haven't already, I highly recommend everyone watch The Business of Birth Control. Eye-opening, because we definitely deserve options too that aren't going to kill us, that don't need to have almost like a warning label, like a cigarette pack, does.
Yeah.
And like you said, holistic options, like what we're not really taught anything about cycle tracking, or I just learned to track my cycle at 30 something years old. And, like if we learn to track these things younger and had all that information from our teen years to now, then we really could use it as birth control. Then we really could use it to understand and catch illness sooner. But it's really hard when you're trying to learn all of this stuff in your 30s, 40s. And so I just think like if it starts with like a poor education in the beginning and then lots of shame around these topics. So I know me and my friends, the only place we learned about any of menstruation or sexuality, anything, was like Cosmo.
Yeah.
It was like, what did Cosmo or Sex in the City teach us? And I'll tell you, they didn't mention this at all.
Yeah. And it's like so our generation is I think changing so much. Like our daughters, I think that will be, our generation, whoever wants to have children, our children will be taught differently, but it's up to us to really learn about our body, because unfortunately, we just really can't count on the medical system to teach us the full spectrum. That's why I love the idea of naturopathy so much, because it looks not just at the Western medical system, but also Eastern and different holistic options. And there's a much more full spectrum approach than what we're typically used to here in the West. So
it's crazy. Yeah. Like, it's crazy you say that, because your sister was the one who like really helped me initially, even like connect so many dots about my period, as I was going to acupuncture, and was the first person to ever even link that I was anemic. And I was late 20s and like had, I just thought tracers in my eyes were normal. I just thought feeling lightheaded when you stand up too fast is normal, and never like linked it. And then she pointed out that I had like a lack of yin, and I was lacking a bleed, even though I was like I was lacking a bleed. I was on a Mirena. So I had an IUD, and I went to her because I was having night sweats and I was like getting really hot. And so she like helped me relieve the heat and like, excess of that energy. And then I was on the table one day, and all of a sudden I like had this feeling coming out of my belly, almost like, if there's any Harry Potter fans, it looked like a Dementor, like kind of.
wow.
And like it came out of my womb space. And then after that, anytime I would lay in Shavasana, my brain was like, get your IUD out. Get your IUD out. Like anytime I had quiet time and I would wake up, I'd be like, get your IUD out. And at the time I didn't want to have children. So I was like, why am I like having this thought? I don't want to reproduce with this person. So like,
yeah.
And then I listened to the wrong podcast. A friend recommended a podcast, but I listened to the right podcast. I listened to the wrong episode, and I listened to this lady who basically said that if you date someone on birth control, you should like meet them off birth control first too, before you like commit, because you might not like their smell anymore, and you might not like all these things. And I always like knew it was time to break up with people when I didn't like their scent. So it just really clicked for me. And so I like got my IUD out, broke up with my boyfriend 6 months later. Your sister introduced me to a pelvic PT, and then like pelvic yoga training. And here we are. Yeah. And it was just like, it was someone paying attention to those symptoms and like to those things. But until you meet someone who points you in that direction of even telling you like a pelvic PT or a pelvic yoga instructor, like no one hears about it. And she only happened to, I think, know the person because they were renting space from her. And so I really lucked out that the pelvic PT she introduced me to, as I went on to pelvic yoga training, I had a pelvic physical therapist who was like also educating me and helping me learn about my own body. Um, and so it was just, yeah, it was like a crazy if you give a mouse a cookie. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
interested to whoever sees this, like, it'll be like this video might like be just like a crumb
Yeah.
that gets you to finding an acupuncturist, a pelvic PT, a naturopath, a pelvic yoga instructor, or whoever to help go. Because it's like we do kind of have to have all help piece it together for each other because the medical system has not.
Absolutely. And I also just want to like shout you out because also my sister acupuncture with Ashley in Phoenix.
Oh, she's amazing. I've been going to her for 5 years. She's been a big part of my journey.
She's a phenomenal acupuncturist. I don't just say that because she's my sister, but also you, Lisa, because it's people like you and like us. And, I'm doing a different sort of thing, but like the things that you're really interested in that aren't mainstream, that are scary initially, maybe to talk about, or that are like, oh, I'm going to like talk about my period on Instagram. Oh, like this is important though, because
Yeah.
we have to have the bravery to do that to help other people. Just like you had all those people who were parts of the cookie crumble for you. Like maybe you're that, you watching this, maybe you're that cookie crumble and whatever it is that you want to do, even if it has nothing to do with this, we're all
Yeah.
a little part of the cookie, right?
Well, and
Um,
I never thought like I would end up teaching like period yoga, like what even is that? Like for me, um, I think, God, was it Brene Brown? Someone said, no, I think it was, some, it'll come to me. But like someone said, you either share your hurt or your healing. And like my period used to be excruciating. Like it was like unbearable. Like I said the words, I hate my period all the time. Like I wanted it to go away. I hated being a woman because it hurt so bad. And like I like had such a horrible feeling towards my period that like I never thought I could feel this way towards my period. And so like I never thought I would teach period yoga, but then it's like also like once you feel like this pain you've had for so long, and then I like figured out how to like ease my period cramps like through yoga. Like once I knew it, like I had to share it, even though it was a little uncomfortable at first to talk about my periods and stuff. Like it's like kind of funny because like I didn't think about it too much because I was just like, well, but I know now how to help. So like
yeah.
I would be a real jerk to keep it to myself. And that's how I
Yes.
felt about yoga. I took yoga teacher training, like my initial one, to deepen my practice. Like I didn't plan to teach. But then once I did it and it helped my anxiety, I was like, well, I'd be a real jerk to not share this. And so it kind of just, yeah, I feel like my students, even though they might not want to become a pelvic yoga teacher, like once they hear it, like they go tell a friend, like, no, you don't,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be that way. Like, I think we were told like it was almost this burden, our period's some burden we have to carry.
Yeah.
I know my grandma made it seem like a burden. She also made it seem like racing to the bathroom and being constipated were normal. Like she never, I just assumed like, you have issues down there, you don't really talk about it. And that's just the norm.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like I remember my first time I like had a period and it didn't hurt. And it was before I tracked my period really well. And I didn't know I was on my period until I saw blood on the ground. And I was like, what? Like it doesn't even hurt? Like it blew my mind because I was just like, didn't believe it until I like saw the blood and was like, I wasn't in any pain. And yeah, maybe sometimes you'll always have everybody's body's different. But like for me, I just didn't even know that was an option.
Yeah. So
So
let's talk about the masculine and feminine aspects related
yeah.
to the pelvic floor. And because I think a lot of us are familiar with the terms masculine and feminine and like
Mm-hmm.
how it applies to our life in different ways, but we don't think about it in relation to our pelvic floor, certainly. But even in relation to menstruation, to sexuality. So I'd love
Yeah.
to hear your take on that, like
The
specifically how it's
balance.
showing up more in the masculine, but whatever you want to share.
So our pelvic floor muscles, just like any muscle, need to be strong and flexible. But our culture tends to focus on one of those more than the other. Like you said, Kegel, everybody's heard of a Kegel. And so we all think like a Kegel is like this cure-all, but like, let's think of Kegel as like a yang thing. So like strength. It's what I'm going to like do a strength exercise, right? So like, I wouldn't ever tell you to like only do a bicep curl and like not stretch out your bicep. I wouldn't tell you like to just only do strength. Like in yoga class, we do a blend of strength and stretch. But yeah, our culture is like Kegels, Kegels, Kegels. But like these are just like any other muscle. Like you need to stretch and strengthen it, or else it can get like really tense. It can get knots. Like, you know how you get knots in your neck?
Yeah.
You can get knots down here. So then let's imagine you have a knot, and then let's say you're playing with a toy or a partner or something. You put the toy in there and it feels like you're poking the trigger point. Like that's not going to feel very good. And so then let's say for cramps, like if these muscles are really tense, then it's almost like you have like a Charlie horse, like you've had a Charlie horse in your calf. Like imagine that in here. But then like if you had Charlie horses in your calves, would I tell you to go do calf raises? No, I would tell you to go stretch your calves.
Mm-hmm.
Go stretch and relax them first. Make the spasming stop. And then we can work on strengthening them. And I wouldn't tell you to go do weighted calf raises. So, like, same idea with the pelvic floor. If you're super tense, I'm not going to tell you to do Kegels. And I'm sure not going to tell you to do a yoni egg.
Well,
I would tell you to do a dilator, or I would say see a pelvic PT and make sure a dilator is right for you. I would say in yoga class, let's work on relaxing and do a reverse Kegel. So, like, same thing. Like, we need to figure out here first, are we balanced or imbalanced? Like, are we overly tense or are we overly weak? You can be both. But usually, if you're both, we want to like I said with the calves, I'm going to want to stretch your calves before I go strengthen them. I'm going to want to relieve the tension before I add the strength. And our culture is just skipping over that completely. Like nobody's hearing about reverse Kegeling. Nobody's hearing about pelvic floor relaxation. Like we've been told our whole lives, like you need to be tighter. Like don't let it get loose.
Yeah.
Like you want like I remember as a kid, like I was just like, I don't want to be loose down there. Like we thought that was like a real worry. Like we had
Yeah.
to really think about it at 18. And it's like I was sitting there like so tense and it was making my period cramps worse. I was so tense and it was making my intimacy worse because it felt like getting poked in trigger points. I was so tense, it didn't open up. And so just like with yoga, like a balance of effort and ease, of doing and non-doing. We need to learn when we need to add strength and when we need to add stretch. And these are devices to help. Like this is called a dilator, and like pelvic PTs can like show you how to use this to help stretch internally. But like most pelvic PTs, like will never tell you to use a yoni eggs, especially, but like a Kegel weight, because almost no one actually really needs this. This is like if you have like expert level, like you've been training your pelvic floor for the Olympics and like, and like really it's just like just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should. But our culture, we always just do more, 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 more. Like we now even have chairs that people can sit on and they do the Kegels for you, or shorts people can wear and do the Kegels for you. And yeah, and they will literally advertise it as like 100 Kegels in like 5 minutes. And it's like, would I ever tell you to do 100 squats if you hadn't done one squat properly on your own? Would I have you go do a machine, go do it for you? Like, it's just,
Yeah.
you're not learning how to actually do a Kegel properly when it does it for you. And you're definitely not learning how to relax. So I think just like most things, we want like an instant, easy fix. But like, this is such an individual thing. Like, you might be tense on the left side. I might be tense on the right side, and like things that can add tension. Like, I know a lot of girls who drive with their left leg up. I am one of them. I don't like to admit this. But like think about every day if you're driving with your leg up, then it's gonna maybe add some tension on the left side a little bit more. If
Mm.
you sleep on a certain side and you have your leg turned up, if you always cross your legs, that can add tension. So all these like different things, if you're wearing high-waisted yoga pants that are really tight, like
No.
those
No.
are going to create tension. So like now I almost always wear like very baggy things that allow my pelvic floor to breathe. And so again, it's that balance of yin and yang. I found out my body was lacking yin. So like I didn't need more yang. I didn't need hot yoga. I didn't need core yoga. I didn't need Kegels and yoni eggs. I needed yin. I needed to relax. I needed to stretch. I needed to relax my pelvic floor through yoga poses. I had to get manual massage treatment from my pelvic PT. I had to get therapy to work through all the stuff that came up. And I had to just like really learn to breathe and relax into my pelvic floor. But then there's other students, you know, who find out they need to really build strength. Maybe they don't need to be stretching. Maybe they do need to be Kegeling. And so I think it's really, really important for people to find out because it can affect menstruation, period pain. If you do ever end up having a baby, like if your pelvic floor muscles are too tense, baby doesn't have room to grow and move as much. And then if we can't relax, then the labor part could definitely be different. And so everybody thinks too, like postpartum, that you just like need to Kegel and get everything tight again. But like birth can cause trauma. Sometimes trauma can cause tension. Then we need to learn how to relax it. You might have scar tissue. So some other things that can cause tension would be so birth trauma, sexual trauma, wearing those high-waisted pants, wearing things that are like constantly sucking you in. If you constantly are sucking in, yeah, there's
On the
lots
tight pants are like a nation. I'm like, all of my pants are tight.
it's hard for me. I was always high-waisted yoga pants. Like that's the yoga teacher outfit,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
And I only have one pair now. I still wear, and once I wear them, like I feel like I'm getting like suffocated.
Wow.
Like she needs to breathe. And I also like now I only wear like cotton underwear, you know, like I don't and like things like thongs. Like I used to wear thongs all the time when I was younger, but that like traps moisture and like it could like you have to like I used to just do maybe what like looked good, but
Mhm.
now I have to like really think about like what feels good, you know?
Oh my
Uh,
gosh, just repeat that.
Not just
So
what looks
good.
good, it's what feels good. And I used to like, you know, like these little tight underwear were like trapping moisture. Like I wish I knew that in college. Like the amount of times that I was just like, what's happening? Like, why am I just it's not that kind of damp, but it's very damp, you know? And like,
Yeah.
or like the fabrics that don't breathe, or just like the long-term effects that like those tight-waisted pants, like skinny jeans, like all tied up, like it affects your breathing, which then affects your posture, which then affects like if you're not getting adequate breathing, like it just affects everything.
Yeah. This is
And
all
so
so interesting.
it's
So
like us trying to fit into these, and it's just all constant clenching too. Like,
yeah. So, I mean, there's just so much in here like for us to think about. This is like you live and breathe this conversation every day for me. I'm
yeah,
like, oh dear God. Like
having
tight
some light
pants,
bulbs.
the yoni eggs. Yoni eggs I've always wondered about because it's one of those things that there's so much marketing for, but nobody really,
Yes.
well, except you, nobody really like knows. I don't know. It hasn't been around enough. It's like trendy. There's so many
Yeah,
people
and I
who are
never hear a
trendy.
single one of those people warning you that this could make your period pain and sex so much worse. Like nobody told me when I bought these and like did a little program about it, nobody warned me who they weren't for.
Mhm.
Nobody was like, and if you have a tense pelvic floor, maybe skip this one, you know? And it literally made it made intimacy feel like stabbing. Like it hurt so badly. Like, and I had always experienced pain. Like it made it so much worse.
Wow.
And it wasn't until I like took the training and realized that like that's what had made it worse. And I was sitting there being told like these will make everything better. Pick the stone. Like I picked rose quartz because I wanted compassion and love and softening and like and I didn't even think about like it's still at the end of the day a weight.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you really want crystal, then like maybe look at a crystal dilator if you need to stretch. So it's like it's not to say you can't use crystals, but like are you using the right crystal tool for you? If you're overly weak, you might again, you got to learn to do a Kegel on your own and do it right before you ever add a weight.
So
Most of us
what do you think about the people who are doing like weight training? Like I've seen people who like compete.
hold like
Hold on,
someone held a surfboard.
we have to describe what this is because a lot of people won't know. So I've seen on Instagram people that talk about they can
Like
carry this certain
yes,
amount of weight,
yes.
not inside, it's outside. And I'm
But
just
it's like they're holding like an egg like this, but then with like a weight attached.
yes.
Yes. And like that to me is again, it's like yang. It's that overly masculine, like do more, like do the it doesn't have to like, is that beneficial for that person? And I say this with a lot of yoga poses. Like, do you want to go there? Does your ego want to go there, or does your body want to go there?
Mm-hmm.
Like when I was doing this, I was like bragging about like how I had the tightest, and I jokingly called it the jaws of life. Like I knew, but I didn't know that that was bad. I'd been told my whole life that's what you wanted. Like Cosmo and all these things were
Yeah.
like, do your Kegels. I knew what a Kegel was. I didn't know if I was doing it right. Like that's the thing too, is most of the gynos who will tell you do a Kegel, like how many of those gynos actually demonstrated and talked you through how to do a Kegel? Like that's one thing I like about pelvic PTs, and like I wish pelvic PTs and gynos work together more. I hope one day they do. I think that's where there will be like more of that balance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I feel like the thing I like about them is they will do an exam if you're comfortable and see if you can do a Kegel properly and
Mm.
see if you can do the relaxation properly. And like they don't just spend 5 minutes with you like a gyno, like
Yeah.
they spend an hour and they like really talk you through it. And again, it's that time, it's having time to get comfortable. Like someone should have noticed when I was at the gyno that like the speculum was hurting me. I winced.
Yeah.
Every time it hurt, that should have been a sign to the gyno that I had what's called hypertonic or tense pelvic floor muscles. And so like I just really hope that one day that like gynos recognize more of these signs and refer out to people like pelvic PTs or pelvic yoga and stuff like that, because like this could have been so easily caught. And I took pills, hormonal pills for how long to help period pain that weren't helping anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's why it's really important to figure out your imbalance, because your imbalance can be the root of so many other issues. Like if we don't have full blood and nerve flow down there, are we going to be able to like be creative?
So
Are
what
we
does
going to be
that
able to
mean?
tap
Full-blooded.
into our power? What do you mean?
What does that mean? Full-blooded nerve flow.
So when these muscles are, so think about like when you just get like a kink in your neck, like you can like just kind of tell when you get a kink. So then like when you get that kink, like a nerve is pinching or something.
Yeah.
So then you're not getting full nerve and blood flow. So like when we have these really tense muscles in our pelvic floor, if they get really tense, then you're not going to get adequate blood and nerve flow. So like a lot of times, if you have tense pelvic floor muscles, you also have like really tense inner thighs. And so that blood and nerve flow also runs to your clit. And so like if we have really, really tight inner thighs and we're not getting full blood and nerve flow up here, then how is that going to be for sensation?
Mm-hmm.
If we're not getting full blood and nerve flow, then how are our systems like menstruation going to work? I used to brag, another one of my bragging. All the things I bragged about my vagina were actually symptoms. I bragged that it was tight, it was tense. I bragged that I had like little to no period. Like my blood was like so minimal, I didn't even need to use a tampon. That was a sign that I had low yin. My blood wasn't built enough. It was a sign of the anemia, a sign of tense pelvic floor muscles. And then I was a power peer. So like I would brag that I was the fastest peer around. I'd be like, no, guys, I will take 2 seconds. I time me and I would come back. So like if you hear a friend or you hear yourself and you hear like peeing like a racehorse, that's a sign. Like that could be tense pelvic floor muscles. And even just like think about it, like we all know what that we've all done it before. We know. Like that's just like, why are you forcing it? Like just breathe your pee out. And like same with poops, if we're bearing down and forcing, like that's a sign we might have tension. And so like, it's kind of like you'll scrunch up your face. So it's like almost like you're tense down here. You're going to start to, and then everybody starts holding their breath. And it's like the worst thing we could do. It's like that force and flow, effort and ease. And so if you are a power peer or you tense up when you poop, definitely go see a pelvic PT. Definitely come check out my class. Because that's like a sign.
So
like
what are some signs of the opposite? Because you mentioned people could also be weak. What would that look like?
So one that's tricky are bladder leaks. So everybody always thinks bladder leaks come from being weak, and then they like want to go do Kegels. Bladder leaks can be either or. So it's really important to figure out if your bladder leaks are coming from too much tension or from weakness. So like let's say like muscles are super tense, then like when you get the tiniest bit in your bladder, it's going to feel like you have to go, and it's like squeezing on it. So it just kind of feels like you always got to go. So like the people who like go and they go have like 2 drops and they actually didn't have to go, they're probably tense. Or like let's say you go to the bathroom and you like get up and you think you were done and then you have that trickle down the leg a little bit, that might be a tension. But then you can also get them from weakness. So like it could be like you sneeze and like feel a little bit. So it's really important to get that clarified with the pelvic physical therapist so you know. And then some other signs that you might have weakness, if you feel like a lot of vaginal heaviness, like it feels like you always have like a full tampon in, even when you don't, that can be a sign. And then what we really just want to always like keep checking for is like we just want to avoid like any type of pelvic organ prolapse. So that could be bladder, that could be anything like that. And so postpartum, that can be something to really look out for, but also just, as you get older, the muscles can get weaker. Yeah. So I will say 75% of people born with a uterus have at least one side that's overly tense. So that was like the stat I learned in my training. And so like the majority of us have at least one side that's tense. So again, always important to kind of address that tension first. Make sure we have the Charlie horse gone before we start doing the weighted calf raises.
I mean, it makes total sense. How often, like when even if we're just scrolling and it's like, take a moment to breathe. And you're like, oh yeah, I was just like.
Yeah. And so like the pelvic floor, so many people just like are breathing in their chest and that they haven't even really breathed and relaxed their pelvic floor ever before. So it can just be like a really different feeling. So, I mean, if you just like close your eyes or first I'll show you an image first, and this might help. So like think of your pubis and your tail and then your sit bones. So it's going to make a diamond. And you can even feel your pubis, feel your tail, feel your sit bones. If you feel inside of your sit bones and it's tender, that can be another sign that we have some tension. And then sit where your perineum is pointing straight down. So we don't want the perineum to be pointing back or forward. I hear lots of other names for this in my prenatal class. You can call it whatever you want, but we want it to be pointing straight down. And then from here, imagine as we inhale, the points of the diamond expand down and out. As we exhale, they just drift back to where they started. We're not pulling them up and in. We just inhale down and out. And then exhale back to where we started. I like to imagine an upside down flower. And as you inhale, the petals blossom gently open down and out. Exhale, closing one petal at a time. So we don't want it to be like a bearing down. We don't want it to be like a forcing a pee or a poop. It's really breathing in and letting the breath do that stretch for us. And so I always kind of tell people, like, for reverse Kegels, we're kind of like going down to the basement and then back to the first floor, down to the basement and back to the first floor. If you're adding Kegel, it's the same. You go down to the basement, but then you go up to the penthouse and then go down to the basement. Yeah. And so, like, once you start to add those contraction and that lift up and in, but it's really hard for people to kind of even not do that Kegel, like it's funny how much we've kind of just been, our society keeps suck it in, do more, suck it in, suck it in. And so it's hard sometimes for people to get that really deep breath. I know myself, like, my pelvic floor was so tense. And when your pelvic floor is tense, it can kind of block the flow down. And so it can get you kind of forced up in your upper chakras. Because, like, it's kind of, the energy is stuck at the bottom chakras. So then it kind of can get you almost like very anxious, more in your head. Like, it's almost like an overabundance of these top chakras.
Yeah.
But you don't get that grounding, that stuff we need from the first and second chakra. Mm-hmm. And so, like, when we are tense and cut off from that, it could block creativity. It could block fire and passion. Like, from that standpoint, that could, like, really dampen someone's energy and, like, going out. Passion, it could dampen your passion. And then I think on the other side, yes, your muscles could be really tense and dampening your passion. But what if your muscles are really weak and you're leaking all over yourself? And, like, then you don't feel so sexy, like, then you don't feel good. If you, like, are so afraid to let out gas that you, like, might go to the restroom, like that doesn't feel built, then we can't tap into that fire either. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's really, really important. I think that some people have definitely benefited off of us being, like, very cut off from full power and full creativity. And
definitely, yeah.
And tapping into it. And like I said, I used to say I hate my period, and but period pain was a symptom. And once I got rid of that symptom, like, I really love my period now. Like, I look forward to my bleed, and it's, like, is a release, and I get that balance. And, like, but my period used to just be, like, so hard on me. I couldn't really enjoy any of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say the same with intimacy. Like, it used to just kind of almost feel like a job because I didn't really enjoy it. I just thought it hurt. I just thought it hurt for all women. And I just thought that was, like, this is how it is, And, like, I think that's, like, just something I, like, really want to inspire people, is that, like, not accepting less than we deserve, like, you deserve to, like, love your period and, like, have a good, like, relationship with your bleed. And, like, we deserve to, like, enjoy pleasure. Mm-hmm. But if you're feeling so much pain that you can't enjoy pleasure.
And having the awareness that it doesn't have to be that way. Because even, like, when you watch old movies and stuff, I've noticed the women almost always, they never seem to enjoy sex. Like, that's, like, they talk about it as if there's no understanding that sex could even be pleasurable for a woman.
They're like, on your birthday.
Well, even it's like, they thought it was just, like, for men's pleasure only.
Yeah.
So through time, we're getting more and more information of, like, actually we get to experience great pleasure, maybe even more pleasure. And so having the awareness that, first of all all of the sorts of pain that you've mentioned, it doesn't have to be that way. That's not necessarily normal, but a lot of people are experiencing that. And
Yeah.
even when you were talking about the anxiety, it's just like ding, ding, ding. Like so many people are experiencing great amounts of anxiety. And then if you're one of the people watching, perhaps asking yourself, like, let me tune into my sacral chakra, to my root, and feel like what's actually going on there. Is there a connection there?
Yeah. I
Love
will
for
say
sure.
I'm open to helping everyone with their pelvic issues, but I think like where I really can help them most, because I think I like relate, is like I didn't realize all these things were so connected, was like I was angry, like I had painful periods, and I had anxiety. And like all three of them were so related to my pelvic floor, and I had no idea. Like
Um,
none. Cause like, you know, it was like constantly clenched and held. So like it was affecting so much of my life, you know, like, and I will say that whether it's pelvic yoga, pelvic physical therapy, however you are, like I say they go best like together, but whichever way of helping find balance you're doing, like I didn't listen to the advice of my pelvic PT, and I wish I had, is like make sure you have a therapist or some type of whatever your emotional support professional, like someone outside of your inner circle that's not like your partner or your friend, but like a professional support to help unpack some of what can come up. For me, I assumed there would be some, but I was not really prepared for what came up for me as I started to heal my pelvic floor with just like my sexual trauma. And I did about 6 months of treatment and then had to just like stop. I was like, no, because we got to the dilator work, we got to that, and I was like, and we're done. We're done here. And then I went and saw a therapist, and it's like been a slow journey. It's ever going for me with the dilators. Um, but like really unpacked for me like what some of that was. And I just, yeah, I feel like I recommend it to all students, and I feel like nobody takes me too seriously until they like start.
yeah.
And then they're like, oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Because you just really don't know what you might unlock. Some of it might be as expected, some of it might not. And so I just know that I really, really, it helped me so much. And knowing when to pause, like I think that's part of the yin and yang, is like knowing when it's maybe a little bit of time for effort.
Mhm.
Like for me, it's been a while and I need to get back at like trying this again. Like it was a mental block and I'm ready to like work on it again, but like also knowing when not to push it. Like there, like when I do my dilator work, like sometimes I start it and I get triggered and I just, it's okay to stop. And so I think like not using like over forcing yourself in any of this, like that's again the balance of effort and ease, is like knowing when to try, maybe progressing to the next size, but knowing when it's like, no, we need to take a little pause on this. Because
Yeah.
I'll tell you from personal experience, if you try to keep doing your pelvic healing nonstop, like you get like, it's not even burnout, but it's like too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you shared so much that I think is so eye-opening for everybody today, definitely for me. So I'd love for you guys watching if you want to put in the comments what was most helpful for you. And also, I want to encourage you to be brave and share, because other people might watch this and be afraid to share, or, seeing your comment will make them feel seen and like they're not alone. And so if you feel confident sharing in the comments, I would love to hear what aspect of this felt most supportive for you. Also, just like send some love to Lisa. So, Lisa, how can everybody work with you and learn more from you around this? What's the best way for people to find you?
Instagram, I will say yoga teachers and email don't mix very well. So, but super responsive on Instagram. So do yoga with Lisa. And then that's my website as well, doyogawithlisa.com. That's where people can sign up for like period yoga. And so period yoga, prenatal yoga, postpartum. And then I do private. So period yoga is really great, I think, for building community and like having a safe space to talk. sometimes I bring guests on that teach us about a little something I don't maybe know. Like I bring in a pelvic PT who goes a little further with a different aspect. But sometimes we just have open discussion and give the floor for if people do want to share about their bleeds, which is nice because it is like a safe space to open up, ask questions, and just like they're like, you don't have to say TMI, like no such thing, like open sharing. And so I think that's great for building the community, and that class is really relaxing. It is all about stretching and relaxing. So it is for the people who are more tense pelvic floor. But I also offer private. So each pelvic floor is different. Each person's history is different. So if you want something more customized and, I don't offer a class for every single pelvic issue, but like, let's say you have bladder leaks or one of those other issues that I don't have a specific class for, the privates are a good way to really work on individual issues. And then pelvic PTs, I think, if you haven't seen one yet, pelvicrehab.com is a good place to look up one in your area. And then if you are in Arizona by chance, or I know some good ones in New York, I need to find, wait, no, I know one in Florida. Yes, Dr. Sabrina Baxter. She's a great one in Florida. But yeah, if anybody needs a recommendation, don't hesitate to reach out. And if you're just like, I don't know if this is a pelvic floor issue, like just ask. Like, oh, like queefing. We didn't even touch on queefing, but like if you're queefing every time you do yoga, like hit me up. Especially handstand. I feel like the queefs come out with the handstands.
I'm curious now about it. Like
but okay, so the queefing might be a sign of the weakness. But very common in like 2 or 3 yoga poses because of like the way the air pressure works. So
that's interesting with handstands. I'm not like great at inversions, so I haven't experienced that with handstands, but yeah. Okay.
It happens sometimes with like 3-legged dog. So it's kind of being in that over position and like lifting a leg. Yeah.
Well, clearly Lisa has so much wisdom around this. So like, please reach out to her if you have questions. That'll be faster than you like commenting a question here. So reach out to her. She also gave you guys a really special gift. So she's being really generous and offering you 50% off of a period yoga class. So the coupon code is Allie50. Does it matter if it's in caps or not?
It shouldn't. I have it in all caps, but I think it works either way.
So they just go to doyogawithlisa.com.
Yep. And then they can just click on the period yoga sign up and then use Allie50 and I'll give them half off of period yoga. So the next one is, I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget it. Oh, October 6th.
October 6th. So that coupon will work until the end of the year, 2020.
Yeah. So you can use it the rest of the year.
So if you're watching like in 2 years or something, you can still reach out to Lisa, but it won't be that specific coupon. So don't look it up. It won't work. Well, thank you so much for your time and like sharing about your time and bringing out your pelvic bowl. This was so helpful for.
If you have any questions after too, don't hesitate to reach out. You or the person watching.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please comment, subscribe to the channel if you want more unconventional wisdom like this about our sacred feminine bodies. That's what I love to share about. So I will see you on the next video.